Howdy, folks. Thank, thank you kindly for joining me, Hearth-Side. It's been a little while. We read A Christmas Carol through December, and then I got through the holidays, and after Christmas and New Year's, things were um, a little all over the place, really, but getting settled into a new routine. And I was thinking that with it being so cold and still indoors by the hearth, by the wood stove, that we'd start reading Frankenstein. There's something about the weather lately that has me thinking about uh, some of the colder elements that are talked about in this book. Um, and anyhow, so I don't know if how many of y'all have read it or have just seen various film versions. I haven't read it in a number of years myself, but I sure enjoy several different film versions and other incarnations of the characters. Tonight I have um, tonight I have a little English breakfast tea and some shortbread cookies that my grandmother mailed me for my birthday. So I hope that y'all I hope that y'all are warm tonight. I hope that you have something good to drink, tea or something stronger. And I hope that y'all are excited. Um, I don't know. Uh, as we go, I suppose through the book we'll start talking about some of the historic context and perhaps a little bit some of the philosophy. There are some really interesting annotated versions. Most were annotated for literature majors, and that was the primary focus. But somewhat recently, there was one that was annotated for scientists, engineers, and other creators, with a focus on really the ethics involved. And it starts to explain in some depth what of the science in the story is, or what of the practices in the stories are somewhat, maybe today not as shocking, but then would have been really grotesque at the time, and gets into a little bit of the particular ethics about just because you can do something, should you do something, and that sort of thing. So it's pretty interesting. I appreciate the compliment, Lost Signal Society. And so I think we'll probably just wait another minute or two for anybody that's straggling, and then we'll dive right in. As we do get ready, the book, if you haven't read it, starts perhaps somewhat unusually from our perspective. There's a short preface, and then immediately it jumps right into a series of letters that are exchanged. And it takes a little while to get the context of the letters, but they do sort of tie together the whole story. Not dissimilar from maybe in a horror anthology film where there's a wraparound that keeps all the stories bound. And so it's a little odd, but the truth is, for fiction of the day, there was this sense that fiction needed to be grounded in reality, and so often things were taken as or written as if they were journals or they were discovered artifacts or some sort of document. So it would have been somewhat unusual for them to just jump into the story and expect the reader to believe it without providing evidence to the truthfulness behind it in the form of something like a series of letters. So it's a bit more of an introduction. It's not quite as though like Dracula, where you're jumping. The entire book is a letter and then a recording and then another letter and then a journal entry and then a diary and then a newspaper clipping and then a what have you. These really are just sort of to set the stage. And then once the book gets going, the story sort of takes itself up. And so with that, here we are, written in 1818, Frankenstein. Preface. The event on which this fiction is founded has been supposed by Dr. Darwin, and some of the and some physiological writers of Germany as not of impossible occurrence. I shall not be opposed as according the remotest degree of serious faith to such an imagination. Yet, in assuming it as the basis of a work of fancy, I have not considered myself as merely weaving a series of supernatural terrors. The event on which the interest of the story depends is exempt from the disadvantages of a mere tale of specters or enchantment. It was recommended by the novelty of the situations in which it develops, and, however impossible as a physical fact, affords a point of view to the imagination for delineating of human passions more comprehensive and commanding than any which ordinary relations of existing events can yield. I have thus endeavored to preserve the truth of the elementary principles of human nature, while I have not scrupled to innovate upon their combinations. The Iliad, the tragic poetry of Greece, Shakespeare in Tempest and Midsummer Night's Dream, and most especially in Milton, in Paradise Lost, confront to this rule, and the most humble novelist who seeks to confer or receive amusement from his labors may, without presumption, apply to prose fiction a license, or rather a rule, from the adoption of which so many exquisite combinations of human feeling have resulted in the highest specimens of poetry. The circumstance on which my story rests was suggested in casual conversation. It was commenced partly as a source of amusement and partly as an expedient for exercising any untried resources of mind. Other motives were mingled with these as the work proceeded. I am by no means indifferent to the manner in which whatever moral tendencies exist in the sentiments or characters it contains shall affect the reader. Yet my chief concern in this respect has been limited to the avoiding the sorry. Yet my chief concern in this respect has been limited to avoiding the enervating effects of the novels of the present day, and to the exhibition of the amiableness of domestic affection and the excellence of universal virtue. The opinions which naturally spring from the character and situation of the hero are by no means to be conceived as existing always in my own conviction, nor is any interference I'm tongue-tied tonight, nor is any inference justly to be drawn from the following pages as prejudicing any philosophical doctrine of whatever kind. It is a subject also of additional interest to the author that the story was begun in the majestic region where the scene is principally laid, and in society cannot cease to be regretted. I passed the summer of 1816 in the environs of Geneva. The season was cold and rainy, and in the evenings we crowded round a blazing wood fire and occasionally amused ourselves with some German stories of ghosts, which happened to fall into our hands. These tales excited us in a playful desire of imitation. Two other friends, a tale from the pen of one of whom would be far more acceptable to the public than anything I can ever hope to produce, and myself agreed to write each a story founded on some supernatural occurrence. The weather, however, suddenly became serene, and my two friends left me on a journey among the Alps, and, lost in the magnificent scenes which they represent, all memory of their ghostly visions. The following tale is the only which has been completed. Letter 1 to Mrs. Seville, England, St. Petersburg, December 11th, 17. You will rejoice to hear that no disaster has accompanied the commencement of an enterprise which you have regarded with such evil forebodings. I arrived here yesterday, and my first task is to assure my dear sister of my welfare and increasing confidence in success of my undertaking. I am already far north of London, and as I walk the streets of Petersburg, I feel a cold northern breeze play upon my cheeks, which braces my nerves and fills me with delight. Do you understand this feeling? This breeze, which has traveled from the regions towards which I am advancing, gives me a foretaste of those icy climes. Inspirited by this wind of... Excuse me, sir. Cough. Sorry, Archimedes thought he was going to steal some of my either shortbread cookies or tea, and neither is acceptable. He had his dinner. I try in vain to be persuaded that the pole is the seat of frost and desolation. It ever presents itself to my imagination as the region of beauty and delight. There, Margaret, the sun is forever visible, its broad disk skirting the horizon and diffusing a perpetual splendor. There, for with your leave, my sister, I will put some trust in preceding navigators. Their snow and frost are vanished, and sailing over a calm sea, we may be wafted to a land surpassing in wonders and in beauty every region hitherto discovered on the habitable globe. Its productions and features may be without example, as the phenomena of heavenly bodies undoubtedly are in those undiscovered solitudes. What may not be expected in a country of eternal light? I may there discover the wondrous power which attracts the needle, and may regulate 1,000 celestial observations that require only this voyage to render their seeming eccentricities consistent forever. I shall satiate my ardent curiosity with the sight of a part of the world never before visited, and may tread a land never before imprinted by the foot of man. These are my enticements, and they are sufficient to conquer all fear of danger or death, and to induce me to commence this laborious voyage with the joy a child feels when he embarks in a little boat with his holiday mates on an expedition of discovery up his native river. But, supposing all these conjectures to be false, you cannot contest the inestimable benefit which I shall confer on all mankind to this last generation by discovering a passage near the pole to those countries to reach at present so many months, sorry, to which at present so many months are requisite, or by ascertaining the secret of the magnet, which, if at all possible, can only be effected by an undertaking such as mine. These reflections have dispelled the agitation with which I began my letter, and I feel my heart glow with enthusiasm which elevates me, for nothing contributes so much to tranquilize the mind as a steady purpose, a point on which the soul may fix intellectual eye. This expedition has been the favorite dream of my early years. I have read with ardor the accounts of various voyages which have been made in the prospect of arriving at the North Pacific Ocean through the seas which surround the pole. You may remember that a history of all the voyages made for purposes of discovery composed the whole of our good Uncle Tom's library. My education was neglected, yet I was passionately fond of reading. These volumes were my study day and night, and my familiarity with them increased that regret which I had felt as a child on learning that my father's dying injunction had forbidden my uncle to allow me to embark in a seafaring life. These visions faded when I pursued, for the first time, those poets whose effusions entranced my soul and lifted it to heaven. I also became a poet, and for 1 year lived in a paradise of my own creation. I imagined that I also might obtain a niche in the temple where the names of Homer and Shakespeare are concentrated. You are well acquainted with my failure and how heavily I bore the disappointment. But just at that time, I inherited the fortune of my cousin, and my thoughts were turned into the channel of their earlier bent. 6 years have passed since I resolved on my present undertaking. I can, even now, remember the hour from which I dedicated myself to this great enterprise. I commenced by injuring my body to hardship. I accompanied the whale fishers on several expeditions to the North Sea. I voluntarily endured cold, famine, thirst, and want of sleep. I often worked harder than the common sailors during the day and devoted my nights to the study of mathematics, the theory of medicine, and those branches of physical science from which a naval adventurer might derive the greatest practical advantage. Twice I actually hired myself as an undermate in a Greenland whaler and acquitted myself to admiration. I must own I felt a little proud when my captain offered me the second dignity in the vessel and entreated me to remain with the greatest earnestness, so valuable did he consider my services. And now, dear Margaret, do I not deserve to accomplish some great purpose? My life might have been passed in ease and luxury, but I preferred glory to every enticement that wealth placed in my path. Oh, that some encouraging voice would answer in the affirmative. My courage and my resolution is firm, but my hopes fluctuate, and my spirits are often depressed. I am about to proceed on a long and difficult voyage, the emergencies of which will demand all my fortitude. I am required not only to raise the spirits of others, but sometimes to sustain my own when theirs are failing. This is the most favorable period for traveling in Russia. They fly quickly over the snow in their sledges. The motion is pleasant, and in my opinion, far more agreeable than that of an English stagecoach. The cold is not excessive. If you are wrapped in furs, a dress which I have already adopted, for there is a great difference between walking the deck and remaining seated and motionless for hours, when no exercise prevents the blood from actually freezing in your veins. I have no ambition to lose any life on the post road between St. Petersburg and Archangel. I shall depart for the latter in a fortnight or 3 weeks, and my intention is to hire a ship there, which can easily be done by paying the insurance for the owner, and to engage as many sailors as I think necessary among those who are accustomed to the whale fishing. I do not intend to sail until the month of June. And when shall I return? Ah, dear sister, how can I answer this question? If I succeed, many, many months, perhaps years, will pass before you and I may meet. If I fail, you will see me again soon, or never. Farewell, my dear, excellent Margaret. Heaven shower down blessings on you, and save me, that I may again and again testify my gratitude for all your love and kindness. Your affectionate brother, R. Walton. Letter 2 to Mrs. Seville, England, from Archangel, 28th of March. How slowly the time passes here, encompassed as I am now by frost and snow. Yet a second step is taken towards my enterprise. I have hired a vessel, and am occupied in collecting my sailors. Those whom I have already engaged appear to be men on whom I can depend, and are certainly possessed of a dauntless courage. But I have one want, which I have never yet been able to satisfy. And the absence of the object of which I now feel as a most severe evil. I have no friend, Margaret. When I am glowing with the enthusiasm of success, there will be none to participate my joy. If I am assailed by disappointment, no one will endeavor to sustain me in dejection. I shall commit my thoughts to paper. It is true, but that is a poor medium for the communication of feeling. I desire the company of a man who could sympathize with me, whose eyes could reply to mine. You may deem me romantic, my dear sister, but I bitterly feel the want of a friend. I have no one near me, gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well as a capacious mind, whose tastes are like my own, to approve or amend my plans. How would such a friend repair the faults of your poor brother? I am too ardent in execution, too impatient of difficulties. But it is still a greater evil to me that I am self-educated. For the first 14 years of my life, I ran wild on a common and read nothing but our Uncle Thomas's books of voyages. At that age, I became acquainted with the celebrated poets of our own country. But it was only when it had ceased to be in my own power to derive its most important benefits from such a conviction that I perceived the necessity of becoming acquainted with more languages than that of my native country. Now I am 28, and am in reality more illiterate than many schoolboys of 15. It is true that I have thought more, and that my daydreams are more extended and magnificent, but they want, as the painters call it, keeping. And I greatly need a friend who would have sense enough not to despise me as a romantic, and affectionate enough for me to endeavor to regulate my mind. So, as the evening goes, we may be further interrupted. We will be further interrupted. That clock was built in the early 1880s, and it watches over the living room here, Hearth-Side. Perhaps I'll tweet a photo of it later at some point. Anyway, back to the story. Well, these are useless complaints. I shall certainly find no friend on the wide ocean, nor even here among the merchants and seamen. Yet some feelings, unallied to the dross of human nature, beat even in these rugged bosoms. My lieutenant, for instance, is a man of wonderful courage and enterprise. He is madly desirous of glory. He is an Englishman, and in the midst of national and professional prejudices, unsoftened by cultivation, retains some of the noblest endowments of humanity. I first became acquainted with him on board a whale vessel. Finding that he was unemployed in this city, I easily engaged him to assist my enterprise. The master is a person of excellent disposition, and is remarkable in the ship for his gentleness and the mildness of his discipline. He is indeed so amiable a nature that he will not hunt, a favorite and almost the only amusement here, because he cannot endure to spill blood. He is moreover heroically generous. Some years ago he loved a young Russian lady of moderate fortune, and having amassed a considerable sum in prize money, the father of the girl consented to the match. He saw his mistress once before the destined ceremony, but she was bathed in tears, and throwing herself at his feet, entreated upon him to spare her, confessing at the same time that she loved another, but that he was poor, and that her father would never consent to the union. My generous friend reassured the suppliant, and on being informed of the name of her lover, instantly abandoned his pursuit. He had already bought a farm with his money, on which he had designed to pass the remainder of his life, but he bestowed the whole on his rival, together with the remains of his prize money to purchase stock, and then himself solicited the young woman's father to consent to her marriage with her lover. But the old man decidedly refused, thinking himself thinking himself bound in honor to my friend, who, when he found the father inexorable, quitted his country, nor returned until he heard that the former mistress was married, according to her inclinations. What a noble fellow, you will exclaim. He is so, but then he has passed all his life on board a vessel, and has scarcely any idea beyond the rope and the shroud. But do not suppose that, because I complain a little, or because I can conceive of a consolation for my toils which I may never know, that I am wavering in my resolutions. Those are as fixed as fate, and my voyage is only now delayed until the weather shall permit my embarkation. The winter has been dreadfully severe, but the spring promises well, and it is considered as a remarkably early season, so that, perhaps, I may sail sooner than I expected. I shall do nothing rashly. You know me sufficiently to confide my prudence and considerations whenever the safety of others is committed to my care. I cannot describe to you my sensations on the near prospect of my undertaking. It is impossible to communicate to you a conception of the trembling sensation, half pleasurable, half fearful, which I am now preparing to depart. I am going to unexplored regions, to the land of mist and snow, but I shall kill no albatrosses. Therefore, do not be alarmed for my safety. Shall I meet you again, after having traversed immense seas, and returned by the southernmost cape of Africa or America? I dare not expect such success, yet I cannot bear to look on the reverse of the picture. Continue to write to me by every opportunity. I may receive your letters, though the chance is very doubtful, on some occasions when I need them most to support my spirits. I love you very tenderly. Remember me with affection, should you never hear from me again. Your affectionate brother, Robert Walton. So, just pausing for a moment. I hope everybody's enjoying it. This is, we're about to start the third letter as part of the introduction, sort of the wraparound for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We're getting close to chapter 1. Not yet, but the book begins with a young man who he's 28. He's dedicated himself to sailing to the North Pole, regions so far untouched. He's in Russia at the start of the book. He's writing to his sister in England, and he's preparing to embark on this voyage. He's found a ship. He's in the process of hiring various sailors, and they're getting ready to make their way pretty much as soon as the weather is clear enough for them to leave. He's somewhat romantic. He's sort of an unusual upbringing. He's well read, but also somewhat underread because he's self-educated, and he had a very specific focus, mainly voyages, hoping to attempt and find some connecting route that might lead to a Northwest Passage or some sort. He definitely, you can see the romance in his writing. He is sort of dramatic as he talks to his sister and assures her that he cares for her, but that she may never hear from him again, and he hopes that she thinks well of him, and also that he's not overly rash. And anyway, so I hope y'all are enjoying it, and I think it's time to jump into letter 3. I also like that in each one of these he's signed differently. The first one was R. Walton. Then he sends it, your affectionate brother, Robert Walton. And the next one yet, he'll sign even differently still. He'll just sign it R.W. I don't know why, but I find that amusing. So again, to Mrs. Seville, England, this is July the 7th. My dear sister, I write a few lines in haste to say that I am safe and well advanced on my voyage. This letter will reach England by a merchantman now on its homeward voyage, more fortunate than I, who may not see my native land, perhaps for many years. I am, however, in good spirits. My men are bold and apparently firm on purpose, nor did the floating sheets of ice that continually pass us, indicating the dangers of the region towards which we are advancing, appear to dismay them. We have already reached a very high latitude, but it is the height of summer, and although not so warm as in England, the southern gales, which blow us speedily towards these shores, which I so ardently desire to attain, breathe a degree of renovating warmth, which I had not expected. No incidents have hitherto befallen us that would make a figure in a letter. One or two stiff gales and the breaking of a mast are accidents which experienced navigators scarcely remember to record. And I shall be content if nothing worse happens to us during our voyage. Adieu, my dear Margaret. Be assured that for my own sake, as well as yours, I will not rashly encounter danger. I will be cool, persevering, and prudent. Remember me to all my English friends. Affectionately yours, R.W. Letter 4 to Mrs. Seville, England, August the 5th. So strange an incident has happened to us that I cannot forbear recording it, although it is probable that you will see me before these papers come into your possession. Last Monday, July 31st, we were nearly surrounded by ice, which closed in the ship on all sides, scarcely leaving her the sea room in which she floated. Our situation was somewhat dangerous, especially as we were compassed round by a very thick fog. We accordingly lay to, hoping that some change would take place in the atmosphere and weather. About 2 o'clock, the mist cleared away, and we beheld, stretched out in every direction, a vast and regular plain of ice, which seemed to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention and diverted our solitude from our situation. We perceived a low carriage, fixed on a sled and drawn by dogs, pass on towards the north. At the distance of half a mile, a being which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, sat in the sledge, and he guided the dogs. We watched the rapid progress of the traveler with our telescopes until he was lost among the distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder. We were, as we believed, many hundreds of miles from any land, but the separation seemed to denote that it was not, in reality, so distant as we supposed. Shut in, however, by ice, it was impossible to follow his track, which we had observed with the greatest attention. About 2 hours after this occurrence, we heard the ground sea, and before night the ice broke and freed our ship. However, we lay to until the morning, fearing to encounter in the dark those large loose masses which float about after the breaking up of the ice. I profited this time to rest for a few hours. In the morning, however, as soon as it was light, I went upon the deck and found all the sailors busy on one side of the vessel, apparently talking to someone in the sea. It was, in fact, a sledge, like that we had seen before, which had drifted toward us in the night on a large fragment of ice. Only one dog remained alive, but there was a human being within it, whom the sailors were persuading to enter the vessel. He was not, as the other traveler had seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island, but a European. When I appeared on deck, the master said, "Here is our captain, and he will not allow you to perish on the open sea." On perceiving me, the stranger addressed me in English, although with a foreign accent. "Before I come on board your vessel," said he, "will you have the kindness to inform me whither you are bound?" You may conceive my astonishment on hearing such a question addressed to me from a man on the brink of destruction, and to whom I should have supposed that my vessel would have been a resource which he would not have exchanged for the most precious wealth the earth could afford. I replied, however, that we were on a voyage of discovery toward the northern pole. Upon hearing this, he appeared satisfied and consented to come aboard. Good God, Margaret, if you had seen the man who thus capitulated for his safety, your surprise would have been boundless. His limbs were nearly frozen. His body was dreadfully emaciated by fatigue and suffering. I never saw a man so wretched a condition. We attempted to carry him into the cabin, but as soon as he had quitted the fresh air, he fainted. We accordingly brought him back to the deck, and restored him to animation by rubbing him with brandy and forcing him to swallow a small quantity. As soon as he had shewed signs of life, we wrapped him up in blankets and placed him near the chimney of the kitchen stove. By slow degrees he recovered and ate a little soup, which restored him wonderfully. 2 days passed in the manner before which he was able to speak, and I often feared that his sufferings had deprived him of understanding. When he had in some measure recovered, I removed him to my own cabin and attended on him as much as my duty would permit. I never saw a more interesting creature. His eyes have generally an expression of wildness and even madness, but there are moments when, if anyone performs an act of kindness towards him or does him any of the most trifling service, his whole countenance is lighted up, as it were, with a beam of benevolence and sweetness that I never saw equaled. But he is generally melancholy and despairing, and sometimes he gnashes his teeth, as if impatient of the weight of the woes that oppresses him. When my guest had recovered a little, I had great trouble to keep off all the men, who wished to ask him 1,000 questions. But I would not mind. Sorry. But I would not allow him to be tormented by their idle curiosity in a state of body and mind whose restoration evidently depended on an entire repose. Once, however, the lieutenant asked why he had come so far upon the ice in so strange a vehicle. His countenance instantly assumed an aspect of the deepest gloom, and he replied, "To seek one who fled from me." "And did the man whom you pursued travel in the same fashion?" "Yes." "Then I fancy we have seen him, for the day before we picked you up we saw some dogs drawing a sledge with a man on it across the ice." This aroused the stranger's attention, and he asked a multitude of questions concerning the route of which the demon, as he called him, had pursued. Um, Soon after, when he was alone with me, he said, "I have doubtless excited your curiosity, as well as those of these good people, but you are too considerate to make inquiries. Certainly, it would indeed be very impertinent and inhuman in me to trouble you with any inquisitiveness of mine. And yet you rescued me from a strange and perilous situation. You have benevolently restored me to life." Soon after this, he inquired if I thought that the breaking up of the ice had destroyed the other sledge. I replied that I could not answer with any degree of certainty, for the ice had not broken up until near midnight, and the traveler might have arrived at a place of safety before that time. But of this I could not judge. From this time, the stranger seemed very eager to be upon the deck, to watch for the sledge which had before appeared. But I have persuaded him to remain in the cabin, for he is too weak to sustain the rawness of the atmosphere. But I have promised that someone should watch for him and give him instant notice if any new object should appear in sight. Such is my journal of what relates to the strange occurrence up to the present day. The stranger has gradually improved in health, but is very silent and appears uneasy when anyone except myself enters his cabin. Yet his manners are so conciliating and gentle that the sailors are all interested in him, although they have had very little communication with him. For my own part, I begin to love him as a brother, and his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. He must have been a noble creature in his better days, being even now in wreck so attractive and amiable. I said in one of my letters, my dear Margaret, that I should find no friend on the wide ocean. Yet I have found a man who, before his spirit had been broken by misery, I should have liked to have, I should have been happy to have possessed as the brother of my heart. I shall continue my journal concerning the stranger at intervals, should I have any fresh incidents to report. My affection for my guest increases every day. Sorry, August 13th. My affection for my guest increases every day. He excites at once my admiration and my pity to an astonishing degree. How can I see so noble a creature destroyed by misery without feeling the most poignant grief? He is so gentle, yet so wise. His mind is so cultivated, and when he speaks, although his words are cold with the choicest art, yet they flow with rapidity and unparalleled eloquence. He is now much recovered from his illness and is continually on the deck, apparently watching for the sledge that preceded his own. Yet, although unhappy, he is not so utterly occupied by his own misery, but that he interests himself deeply in the employments of others. He asks me many questions concerning my design, and I have related my little history frankly to him. He appeared pleased with the confidence, and suggested several alterations in my plan, which I shall find exceedingly useful. There is no pedantry in his manner, but all he does appears to spring solely from the interest he instinctively takes in the welfare of those who surround him. He is often overcome by gloom, and then he sits by himself and tries to overcome all that is sullen or unsocial in his humor. These are paroxysms, these paroxysms pass him like a cloud from before the sun, though his dejection never leaves him. I have endeavored to win his confidence, and I trust that I have succeeded. One day I mentioned to him the desire I've always felt of finding a friend who might sympathize with me and direct me by his counsel. I said I did not belong to that class of men who are offended by advice. I'm self-educated, and perhaps I hardly rely sufficiently upon my own powers. I wish, therefore, that my companion should be wiser and more experienced than myself to confirm and support me. Nor have I believed it impossible to find a true friend. I agree with you, replied the stranger, in believing that friendship is not only desirable, but a possible acquisition. I once had a friend, the most noble of human creatures, and am entitled, therefore, to judge respecting friendship. You have hope and the world before you, and have no cause for despair. But I have lost everything, and cannot begin life anew. As he said this, his countenance became expressive of a calm, settled grief that touched me to the heart. But he was silent and presently retired to his cabin. Even broken in spirit as he is, no one can feel more deeply than he does the beauties of nature. The starry night, the sea, and every sight afforded by these wonderful regions still have the power of elevating his soul from earth. Such a man has a double existence. He may suffer misery and be overwhelmed by disappointments. Yet when he has retired into himself, he will be like a celestial spirit that has a halo around him, within whose circle no grief or folly ventures. Will you laugh at the enthusiasm I express concerning this divine wanderer? If you do, you must have certainly lost that simplicity which was once your characteristic charm. If you will, smile at the warmth of my expressions, while I find every day new causes for repeating them. August 19th. Yesterday, the stranger said to me, "You may easily perceive, Captain Walton, that I have suffered great and unparalleled misfortunes. I had determined once that the memory of these evils should die with me, but you have won me to alter my determination. You seek for knowledge and wisdom, as I once did, and I ardently hope that the gratification of your wishes may not be a serpent to sting you, as mine has been. I do not know that the relation of my misfortunes will be useful to you, yet, if you are inclined, listen to my tale. I believe that the strange incidents connected with it will afford a view of nature, which may enlarge your faculties and understanding. You will hear of powers and occurrences such as you have been accustomed to believe impossible. But I do not doubt that my tale conveys in a series of internal evidence of the truth of the events of which it is composed. You may easily conceive that I was much gratified by the offered communication, yet I could not endure that he should renew his grief by a recital of his misfortunes. I felt the greatest eagerness to hear the promised narration, partly from curiosity and partly from a strong desire to ameliorate, tongue tied here, ameliorate his fate, as if it were in my power. I expressed these feelings in my answer. "I thank you," he replied, "for your sympathy, but it is useless. My fate is nearly fulfilled," continued he, perceiving that I wished to interrupt him. "But you are mistaken, my friend, if thus you will allow me to name you. Nothing can alter my destiny. Listen to my history, and you will perceive how irrevocably it is to be determined." He then told me that he would commence his narrative the next day, when I should be at leisure. This promise drew me from the warmest thanks. Drew from me the warmest thanks. I have resolved every night, when I am not engaged, to record, as nearly as possible in his own words, what he has related during the day. If I should be engaged, I will at least make notes. This manuscript will doubtless afford you the greatest pleasure. But to me, who know him, and to hear it from his own lips, with what interest and sympathy I shall read it in some future day. Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, Chapter 1. So, that was a little long-winded of an introduction, I suppose, but again, the thought is there that they're offering a little bit of legitimacy to get to sort of, it's sort of donning your disbelief suspenders, right? It it's providing you enough to make it easy to sort of believe what you're reading. And more than that, though, it really does sort of set a mood. I mean, you start, especially for any readers in England, or but you start in Russia, which to them was exotic. And here's a person who was on whaling vessels and other fishing vessels, and really threw himself into that life. And now you board this ship, and I don't know about you, but I mean, we just had a small snowfall here. I can't imagine actually being trapped, not really knowing where you are, and just surrounded by ice, not knowing when it's going to break up. That sight must have been pretty remarkable. And then to see not one but two people, I mean, it really did a good job, I think. At first it is a little jarring because you're expecting Frankenstein and you get this weird letter to his sister. But by the end of it, I don't know, personally, I feel rather invested. And even though, because of pop culture, we sort of have some idea about what the massive person is on the other sledge, it is still intriguing, and it does sort of draw you in. And I think, in a way, pop culture allows for the book to be enjoyable because it does sort of defy expectations. We all sort of have this image of Frankenstein as like a medical student, grave robbing, and all these things, and instead you're just on this ship trapped in the ice and fog, and this dog sled shows up. It's pretty interesting. And as we talk about weather and that sort of thing, I suppose it's also noteworthy that in the 1700s there was something of a mini ice age, which made the suffering of the troops at Valley Forge part of why they suffered so greatly. Was it was during this time of mini ice age, which led to some famine and hardship, and this especially the northern oceans would freeze quite a lot further south than they do today. And for comparison to the mini ice age that was being experienced at the time the book is set, or at least that they were coming out of it at the time the book was set, an iceberg the size of London broke loose from Antarctica yesterday. So it's certainly interesting to ponder that. And so I don't know. I just it does sort of set a mood, though, and in a way, it's actually sort of similar to what we have at the start of Christmas Carol, because it also is a foggy, bitter cold beginning. You know, London is trapped in that sort of icy fog, and it talks about water overflowing and freezing and things. So that seems to be a theme, good or bad. I don't know. That here it is. I woke up this morning. It was 18 degrees out, which, from my perception, is not what I'd call pleasant. I'm definitely enjoying the wood fire tonight, and grateful that I'm not trapped on a ship in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by ice and fog. So I sure hope y'all enjoyed that. I certainly look forward to next week, Thursday night, jumping into chapter 1, starting the book proper, and seeing where it takes us. So I hope y'all have a good week, and I look forward to seeing you Hearth-Side next Thursday. Take care.